American tanks and artillery promised to crush the Viet Cong. But beneath the jungles, an invisible city stretched for over 200 kilometers, mocking the firepower above. Bombs cratered the earth, yet the tunnels swallowed whole armies, letting fighters vanish and reappear at will. How did the North Vietnamese engineer a fortress immune to American technology? And what forced the U.S. to send men crawling face first into the darkness? The answer begins where daylight ends. 3 meters below the jungle floor, the first tier of the tunnels ran just out of reach from tank treads and artillery shells. These upper passages, often less than a meter wide, snaked beneath the surface, protected by at least 1.5 meters of hardened laterite and red clay. The soil, rich in iron oxide, baked solid in the dry season, forming a roof that could withstand the weight of a 50-ton tank or the shock of a nearby explosion. 6 meters down, the next level opened into broader galleries, living quarters, kitchens, and storage rooms. Here, the air was thicker and the darkness more complete. Kitchens used smokeless stoves to vent fumes through hidden shafts, their exits disguised as termite mounds or lost in the roots of old trees. Narrow air passages, camouflaged with leaves and debris, threaded up from these depths to the surface, delivering just enough oxygen to sustain life and keep fires burning low. At the deepest points, 9 to 12 meters underground, command centers and supply caches lay beyond the reach of even the largest bombs. These lower chambers were built to survive direct hits, with zigzag corridors and blast baffles that absorbed shock waves. Emergency exits and sump pits for draining water were tucked into blind corners, their locations known only to a few. Entrances to this hidden world were often less than 30 centimeters across, just wide enough for a wiry fighter to slip through. Trapdoors, built from thick boards and sealed with wax, could bear the weight of a passing vehicle and vanish into the forest floor. Every passage was built by hand, the soil carried away in baskets and scattered in gardens or streams to hide the work. The geometry of the tunnels, tight bends, steep drops, and sudden dead ends, was designed not just for survival, but for confusion, slowing any intruder and turning the earth itself into a labyrinth. Above ground, bombs and tanks scarred the landscape. Below, the tunnels remained intact, their layered depths and reinforced roofs turning brute force into wasted effort. The surface war raged overhead, but the real stronghold lay out of sight, carved into the silent dark. Inside the tunnels, daily life relied on careful planning and the strength of the earth itself. Communal chambers branched off from the main galleries, each with a purpose. Sleeping quarters lined with bamboo mats, medical rooms stocked with bandages and herbal remedies, and command posts where orders traveled by whispered word or coded knocks. Kitchens tucked into dead-end alcoves used huang kam, smokeless stoves to cook rice and soup. Their exhaust funneled through narrow ducts that wound upward, splitting into several outlets disguised as termite mounds or buried in dense roots. This kept smoke thin and scattered, nearly impossible to spot from above. Fresh air drifted down slender shafts, just wide enough for a fist, hidden among shrubs and fallen leaves. These vents, spaced every few meters, kept oxygen flowing through the maze and allowed dozens of people to breathe, even as hundreds crowded the system during attacks. Water was managed with sump pits and sloped floors, channeling runoff away from living areas toward hidden drains. In the dry season, the red laterite soil hardened to a near-concrete shell, holding firm against collapse. Engineers relied on this property, digging with simple tools and reinforcing only the rare weak spot with bamboo or timber. A tunnel roof, at least 1.5 meters thick, could bear the weight of a passing tank or the shock of a shell. The water table, deep below, meant the tunnels stayed dry, even in monsoon floods. Construction was a collective effort. Villagers, fighters, and even children worked side by side, carrying soil out in baskets, scattering it across fields or dumping it in streams to avoid detection. Each new room or passage was mapped only in memory, its location shared among a trusted few. The result was an underground ecosystem, self-sustaining, resilient, and always ready to vanish into silence when danger passed overhead. Even as bombs fell and tanks prowled above, the tunnels remained alive, supporting not just survival, but a hidden community determined to endure. In January 1966, Operation Crimp sent more than 8,000 American and Australian troops into the Iron Triangle, hunting for the elusive Viet Cong headquarters believed to be buried somewhere beneath the tangled jungle. Tanks rolled forward, their treads churning the earth, while engineers swept the approach with mine detectors. Mines had been seeded with careful logic, placed at likely crossing points, along narrow jungle tracks, and at the edges of bomb craters where vehicles might detour. Several armored vehicles were disabled before infantry even reached the main objective. As the ground campaign pressed on, soldiers expected to find surface bunkers or perhaps a fortified camp. Instead, they stumbled on narrow openings hidden beneath leaves and roots. The first teams lowered themselves through these gaps and found a world that defied expectation. 3 levels deep, with chambers branching in every direction. The complexity was staggering. Some tunnels ran for hundreds of meters, zigzagging under the jungle, connecting command posts, field hospitals, and arms caches. Inside one tunnel, Australian troops uncovered a headquarters filled with documents, maps, orders, and radio logs, evidence of a command structure operating just below their feet. Over 1 million documents were seized, but the main Viet Cong force had already slipped away through side passages and concealed exits. Above ground, tanks and artillery had little effect. The tunnels absorbed the shock, and booby traps at entry points made every descent a gamble. After-action reports described the frustration. Firepower and numbers counted for little against an enemy who could vanish into the earth. The operation exposed a new reality. Conventional tactics were failing, and the tunnels demanded a radically different response. Roman plows fitted to the front of American tanks carved deep scars through the jungle in an effort to unearth the hidden enemy. These mechanical blades could slice down to 3 meters, tearing open the uppermost tunnels and collapsing shallow bunkers. But the deeper galleries, those dug 6, 9, even 12 meters beneath the surface, remained untouched. Engineers watched as the plows churned up red clay and splintered roots, only to reveal empty soil where the real strongholds lay further below. With each pass, the machines exposed just how much of the underground world remained out of reach. Armored columns, once symbols of overwhelming power, found themselves funneled into narrow tracks cleared by the plows. The Viet Cong anticipated these routes, laying command-detonated mines and booby traps at choke points. In one ambush near the Ben Cui rubber plantation, a tank's advance triggered a buried explosive, flipping the vehicle and blocking the path. Infantry, forced to dismount, faced sniper fire and punji pits hidden along the edges. The jungle swallowed wreckage and wounded alike, while the tunnels below stayed intact. Attempts to flush out defenders with explosives or gas met with limited success. Watertight doors and baffled corridors blunted shock waves and funneled fumes away from living chambers. Repairs to damaged passages could be completed in a night. Each failed sweep underscored a hard truth. Brute force could scar the earth, but it could not reach the heart of the tunnel system. A new approach was needed, one that would send men, not machines, into the darkness below. In early 1966, American commanders began searching for men who could fit where tanks and explosives could not. The requirements were blunt. Volunteers needed to be under 5'5", wiry, and willing to crawl headfirst into darkness. The Army called them tunnel rats. Most came from infantry or engineer units, drawn by a mix of curiosity and stubbornness, or simply because they fit the uniform. Selection was informal but strict. Size mattered, but so did temperament. Officers looked for steady nerves and quick reflexes. Men who could keep their heads when every inch forward might trip a wire or meet an enemy in the dark. Major Herbert Thornton, a combat engineer with the 1st Infantry Division, shaped the first formal teams. He knew that textbook training would not prepare anyone for these missions. Instead, Thornton built a curriculum from experience. Recruits practiced in makeshift tunnels above ground, learning how to move silently, probe for traps with a bayonet or rod, and listen for the faintest scrape that might mean a hidden door or a waiting defender. They drilled on quick-draw pistol work, knife fighting in tight spaces, and the art of reading air, sensing when the oxygen thinned or the smell of earth changed, warning of a flooded shaft or a poisoned pocket. The standard kit was stripped to essentials: a .45 caliber pistol, sometimes replaced by a .38 revolver for reliability, a bayonet or combat knife, a flashlight, often covered with a red lens, and a coil of rope for extraction. Some carried a small gas mask, though few trusted it would save them from a sudden cloud of CS gas, or worse. Radios rarely worked underground, so a tug on the rope or a shouted word was all the link to the surface team. Communication was short and direct. Every extra ounce was a burden. Every sound risked discovery. Most tunnel rats went in alone, sometimes paired with a veteran for a first descent. Above ground, a support team waited at the entrance, ready to pull them out or call for a medic. The work demanded improvisation. No two tunnels were the same, and no training could erase the fear. But with each mission, the teams learned how to spot a disguised tripwire, how to read the air, how to survive in the black echo beneath the jungle. Sweat pooled at the base of the neck. The air pressed in, thick with earth and the faint tang of metal. For the men who crawled into these tunnels, every sense sharpened to a point. The darkness was complete. Only the thin red beam of a covered flashlight offered any relief from the black. Hands slid forward, feeling for the telltale tension of a tripwire or the sudden give of a hidden door. In the silence, even a heartbeat sounded too loud. Among the first to volunteer was a wiry sergeant from the 1st Infantry Division, known to his friends as Swede. His hands shook as he gripped the .45, knuckles white, the cold metal slick with sweat. He later described the sensation as crawling into the belly of the beast, every muscle screaming to turn back, but knowing the only way out was forward. The smell of mold, cordite, and fear clung to his uniform for days. Above ground, the world was chaos, artillery, radio chatter, the distant crack of rifle fire. But below, the only company was the scrape of boots on packed clay and the distant scurry of rats. Australian engineers faced the same darkness. Sapper Jim Marlin remembered the moment he realized the walls were closing in. The tunnel barely wide enough for his shoulders. He carried a revolver, not the American .45, favoring its reliability in the damp. It was pitch black. The air felt heavy, the walls pressed in, every noise, even your own breathing, sounded too loud. Their kit was stripped to the bare minimum: sidearm, torch, knife, and a coil of rope for the lifeline above. South Vietnamese soldiers sometimes joined the descent, using local knowledge to navigate the labyrinth, but the risks were the same for all. Each crawl was a test of nerve and luck. A wrong move meant a grenade, a pit of spikes, or a sudden, silent attack. Yet the men pressed on, not out of bravado, but because someone had to go first. These moments in the dirt, alone, unseen, and nearly forgotten, became the unwritten record of a war fought in darkness. The scars, physical and invisible, would linger long after the tunnels fell silent. Sometimes we didn't see the sun for days. Only the knowledge of the family next to me kept me strong. The words belong to a woman from Viet Cong, her voice steady as she recalls the months spent beneath the earth. In these tunnels, daily life pressed in from all sides. Families crouched in chambers carved from red clay, the air thick and unmoving, the only light a flicker from an oil lamp or the glow of a shared cigarette. Food arrived in handfuls: a little rice, dried fish, roots gathered at night. Hunger was constant, but silence was stricter. Children learned to play without laughter. Babies were rocked to sleep under the steady thud of bombs above, mothers covering their mouths to stifle a cry. Labor never stopped. Men and women chipped at the walls with hand tools, widening the tunnels, hauling baskets of earth to be scattered in gardens or dumped in streams. In Viet Cong, villagers built nearly 2 kilometers of passages, working in shifts that blurred day and night. The youngest carried water. The oldest watched for signs of collapse. Births and funerals both happened underground, life continuing in the dark. The only clock was the distant rumble of artillery or the vibration of tanks passing overhead. For many, the memory of days without sunlight lingers even now. Survivors speak of the taste of clay, the ache of lungs desperate for fresh air, and the relief that came only when the bombing paused. Yet in the cramped silence, families shared stories, songs, and hope. Small defenses against fear woven into the earth itself. Long after the last tunnel was sealed and the jungle reclaimed its scars, the war's darkness lingered in the minds and bodies of those who lived beneath the earth. For U.S. tunnel rats, the memories did not fade with time. Crawling through black corridors, always alert for a wire or a whisper, left wounds that never fully healed. Studies by the Department of Veterans Affairs estimate that between 17 and 31% of all U.S. Vietnam veterans developed post-traumatic stress disorder in their lifetimes. Those who served as tunnel rats faced especially high risks: relentless anxiety, nightmares, and a constant sense of danger that followed them home. Many struggled with claustrophobia, panic attacks, or a fear of the dark, symptoms that persisted even decades later. Respiratory illnesses, too, were common, a legacy of breathing mold, dust, and chemical fumes in airless tunnels. Vietnamese survivors bear their own burdens. In villages like Viet Cong, families spent weeks or months underground, sheltering from bombs and hunger. No formal studies measure the rate of trauma among these civilians, but oral histories and medical reports describe lasting effects: insomnia, depression, and a quiet vigilance passed down through generations. The Vietnamese government and veterans groups continue to push for recognition and support for those who endured life below ground, citing increased rates of respiratory disease and mental health struggles among survivors. The word rat became a symbol of endurance, of fear, of the inescapable presence of war. Whether crawling through tunnels with a pistol or waiting in the dark for silence to return, the scars left by this underground war are written not just in history, but in the lives of those who survived it. By 1966, the tunnels at Cu Chi stretched over 200 kilometers, with some galleries reaching depths of 12 meters, far beyond the reach of U.S. tanks or Roman plows. Operation Crimp made clear that conventional firepower could not defeat an enemy hidden underground. In response, tunnel rat teams were formed, risking their lives in darkness few would willingly enter. Documents from both sides confirm the tunnel's strategic impact. But the full extent of civilian suffering and long-term health effects remains only partially recorded. Many operational records and personal accounts are still classified or lost. Today, the legacy of tunnel warfare shapes military doctrine worldwide, reminding us that technology alone does not guarantee victory. The Vietnam Tunnel War stands as proof. Even the most advanced arsenals are powerless against ingenuity, determination, and the will to endure beneath the earth.